Good day and welcome. Our guest today is author, writer, novelist, screenwriter, and playwright David MacGregor. His work includes Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Elusive Ear, Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Fallen Souffle, Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Ghost Machine, Sherlock in Love, Sherlock Holmes, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, In the Land of Ice and Fire, Vino Veritas, starring Carrie Preston, Emmy Award winner of The Good Wife, Shadow Players, Peninsula, Easy Way Out, Gather by the Ghost Light, Just Desserts. He's a resident at the Purple Rose Theatre. His plays have performed from New York to Tasmania with hopes that he's coming to Canada. With his work being published through Dramatic Publishing, Play Scripts, Smith & Krause, Applause Hay Publishing, and Theatrical Rights Worldwide. This is just to name a few of pieces of his work. David, welcome, and thank you so much for your time today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
Now, David, you're a writer. Now, what's your favorite genre about writing?
When I'm writing, my favorite genre to write and probably also to read or view is I like dark comedies. Comedy is hard, and usually dark comedies have some kind of element of truth in them, usually a truth that kind of people don't want to acknowledge, that kind of gets swept under the carpet. And so I tend to like that genre a lot. But I'm pretty open. I like good general comedies, drama, mystery, science fiction. I just, to me, it's like literature writing is kind of like walking into a buffet. And what do you feel like today? Do you feel like the roast beef? Do you feel like the chicken piccata? And luckily, there's all kinds of genres out there for us to choose from.
Now, when you refer to dark comedy, I didn't mention one of these plays. I really want to ask you about it. Is that kind of where Scrooge Macbeth came from?
Scrooge Macbeth was simply me. It's a holiday play. It's a play for uh, you know uh, December, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, etc. And I just, a lot of theaters when they do, oh, we got to do a holiday play, they simply go with the tried and true, a Christmas Carol or something like that. And I thought it would be fun to write a comedy, and it's not really a dark comedy, but it's kind of a collision between everything Christmas and everything Shakespeare. And I'd had a play produced by a theater out in Fargo, North Dakota, and they said, we'd really like to kind of commission you to create a new play that we can premiere. And I said, how do you guys feel about a Christmas comedy? And they said, yeah. So I worked on it with them. They're called Theater B in Fargo. And it worked out really well. I mean, it's a comedy, it's a musical. I took popular, Christmas carols, and I just put different lyrics to them. And I had Shakespearean characters singing them. So, the song "I'm Getting Nothing for Christmas," that's Richard III, because I ain't been nothing but bad, right? And I just have him go through all the people he said killed and drowned in vats of wine and so forth. And I have Cleopatra singing Santa Baby. It's the same tune, but I put different lyrics to the songs. And to this day, I've got a daughter who has seen pretty much all of my work. That remains her favorite play. She thought that was absolutely hilarious. So I'm trying to think, has it ever been performed in Canada? I don't know. It's getting produced, in St. Petersburg, Florida this December, which is always a good place for December plays to go. So I might go down to St. Petersburg to check out their production of it. But it's an unrepentant comedy. The whole premise is just it's a community theater that is up against the wall financially. Half the cast of what they're going to do is in the hospital with food poisoning, and they're stuck. And it's like either we basically shut the theater down right now, give everybody back their money, or we do whatever we can do with whatever props we have and they had Christmas Carol props, and then they had, you know, Christmas props, Christmas trees, things like that. And the conceit is that they just make it up as they go along. And it's, to me, it's always really fun to watch really good actors pretending to be really bad actors. So it's an unrepentant musical comedy.
I appreciate that. It sounded very intriguing, and hopefully, someone in Canada says, "Hey, let's get this down here for sure."
Well, that would be lovely. That would be lovely.
So I want to ask you something about writing. What do you think it is about writing that draws people in? You're a very accomplished writer, screenwriter, and you also teach writing as well. What is that piece that people just gravitate towards and love about writing?
Well, if people ask me, which, you know, they do, like, I want to write a play, or I want to write a novel, or whatever. And if they ask me, like, well, what do you recommend um, as advice? And it might sound flippant for me to say this, but it's absolutely true. If it's not a compulsion, maybe don't do it, because it's easy to have an idea. It's easy to say, oh, that would be really fun. And it's easy to write the first 5 or 10 pages. But then the question becomes, how do you crawl across that Sahara desert of the next 70 pages to get to the end? And that's where compulsion comes in. And that, I'm not, you know, for me, it's completely compulsion, to the extent that if I'm not working on something, or I have gotten away from writing because I have other obligations, I literally start to not feel well. Like, what's wrong? Why don't I feel so good? Oh, because I'm not working on something.
Hmm,
So it's kind of a little bit of an addiction almost. I like telling stories. It's almost, I think, to a certain extent, a form of meditation, or uh, it helps keep me sane. You know, it's how, if I've got questions that I want to answer, I get them out in my writing in some way, shape, or form. So it's, you know, I don't do yoga and all the mindfulness things that people do. I just sit down at my laptop and I create a world, and then try to share it with other people.
that's beautiful. When we look at writing, how long would it take you versus, let's say, someone who's just starting to come up with a premise or start from inception to completion on, let's say a novel or a screenplay, something along those lines, something that you would probably teach in one of your semesters? How long would that process typically take someone?
For a play or a screenplay, from concept to like first draft or first viable draft, maybe 6 months as a general rule. It depends. It depends. Sometimes I mull over stuff for years, and I just can't figure out how to get into it. And then it finally occurs to me someday. I do my best thinking driving, mowing the lawn, and taking showers, basically. It's like when I'm not trying to think about it, like if I'm sitting staring at my laptop, you know, be a writer. It's like I'm dead. I've got nothing. What's on YouTube? But if I have some other activity that's taking part of my attention, then it kind of frees up my mind to let ideas come in a little bit sideways and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? So I'm not sure how many writers kind of use that technique, but it works for me.
So kind of when you're doing something mundane, it allows that brain space to open up that creative flow and say, "Hey, let's do this over here," or "What about that?" That's really
Yeah, I
good.
mean, I can routinely get to a point in a play like 3/4 of the way through, and I got it in front of me. I'm typing, and then I don't know what I'm doing, and then I just sit there and curse myself, like, why did you do this? You're doomed. Everyone's gonna, you know, there's gonna be a knock on the door. Excuse me, we found out you're no good. You're a complete fraud. Because I can't come up with it. But then if I do something else, if I get away from it, it's always kind of percolating away in the back of my mind. And so I'm not thinking about it directly, but I am thinking about it. And as I'm mowing the lawn or whatever, if I'm, you know, vacuuming the house, it's like, yeah, that would work. That would do. And then I run downstairs and I type up notes so I don't forget it.
Now, when we talk about writing, do you prefer to write screenplays or more of the theatrical version of it? Is there one that you prefer more over the other?
I like both. I mean, I was, you know, foolishly enough, I started off writing screenplays from Michigan, which was stupid, because I had this, naive notion that if you write really good screenplays, they'll get produced. And you can write really good screenplays, but you need to be in LA
Right.
because writing a really good screenplay is maybe 10% of the equation. The other percent is who do you know or who can you get it in front of? So I got a lot of screenplays. They won a lot of awards. They got optioned a lot, but because I didn't necessarily have personal connections, it was hard to push them over the finish line to get them produced. And also movies, they cost a lot more than plays. So I kind of transitioned into plays, and there's a theater near me. It was started by the actor Jeff Daniels in 1991. It's called the Purple Rose Theater. It's terrific. It's just a great theater. And I knew that they were down the road from me, and I knew that they kind of advertised themselves as well, we're going to promote Midwestern artists, actors, designers, directors, writers. So I wrote a play and I sent it to them thinking, gosh, how lucky can they possibly be? I'm sending them a play. And then I heard back and they said, get lost, you're no good. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a spirit breaker. But there's a fine line between persistence and being too stupid to know when to quit, I guess. So I thought it was a pretty good play. I sent it out to a really well-respected theater in California, and they said, yeah, we like this, we're going to do it. And so they did it. And then a few months after that, I got a phone call from the Purple Rose Theater who had rejected it. And they said, we heard that you just had a play produced in California. And I said, yeah. And they said, can we see it? I said, yeah, sure, I'll send it to you. And I never told them, you guys just rejected this, whatever, 6 months ago, a year ago. And so I sent it to them. And then the next day I got a phone call. Yeah, Jeff Daniels wants to meet you. Can you come out and have lunch? And I sat across from him and he said, we want to do your play and we want to do your next 5 plays. So that was how I got started in the magical world of playwriting.
It's very interesting that it took you getting down to LA there and saying, here's the play for them to come back and say, okay, we'll do it now, even though they had it 6 months prior.
It just goes to show you need to have the right thing in front of the right person at the right time. And if one of those elements is missing, then maybe it is really good, but it's just not in front of the right person at the right time. As a writer or as any kind of creator, you just have to have faith in it and keep at it. And, occasionally you do have that kind of magical combination, but you can't just kind of give up and say, well, I'm no good. And that's where I say compulsion is a big part of it.
So what are those internal motivators for you? I mean, we all experience writer's block from time to time. You talk about this compulsion and therapy piece. You get that no, or you never hear that never ending piece of rejection. What's the drive outside of compulsion to keep going?
Well, there's the money and the groupies, obviously. And that's pretty much it. You know, I have to do it. I just have to do it. I for whatever reason, different people's minds are wired in different ways. Mine was always wired for words. Words always amazed me. Just the whole, how much we take for granted how language works. The fact that, I'm sitting at a desk and I can say that word. I can make that sound come out of my mouth, desk. And you're 250 miles away from me and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
That's magic. That's what makes human beings human beings. That's what makes us, gives us the ability to pass on knowledge. And I just have always loved words. And as a little kid, I liked reading, partly because when I was in school, I was well, let's face it, not the best student. I spent a lot of time in the hallway until they started sending me to the library. Just go to the library. And so I worked my way through well, here's the biography wall and here's the natural history books and here's the fiction. And so that's where my friends were. My friends were, the books in the library because I wasn't allowed in class.
Do you remember your first play that you wrote and then watching it on stage come to life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of dabbled with short plays. My first full-length play, it was based on, I was teaching at a university, and for some reason, I was there at some ungodly hour of the morning. Who knows doing what? But I was walking down the hallway, and I heard an electric razor buzzing behind an office door. And it came to me. I thought, whoever that is, they live there. They're not going home. Maybe they don't even have a home anymore. They just live in their office. No one's going to know. And I thought, I'm going to write a play about a professor of medieval English whose life has collapsed. His wife has left him. His career is in the garbage. He's sleeping underneath his desk. And I'll write a play about that. And so that was the first play I wrote. And yeah, it got done out on the West Coast. The best part about having it produced, when I had it produced here at the Purple Rose, because I can go to the rehearsals, is I remember a moment where I was sitting in the theater watching rehearsal. The director was 2 rows in front of me. And the lead actor, who had this big speech that he was having trouble with, it's like, it's just us. The rest of the places, everybody else go home. It's just us, the actor, the director, and me. And he went through this monologue and he nailed it for the first time. He absolutely got it. Not just the words, but the emotion of it. And I started to kind of like tear up. It's like, this is really good. And I felt like an idiot. It's like, you wrote this, dude. Why are you getting so emotional about this? But then 2 rows in front of me, I could hear the director was crying.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I like this. This works. This touches people, and you can see and you can feel it. And it's just a very visceral, very gratifying feeling.
So when we talk about that gratifying feeling, do you ever still get that butterflies in the stomach when you see your play being performed for the first time of, oh, is it going to land? Is it going to be right? Or are you really at calm from being at the rehearsals?
I act calm. I try to make everyone else believe that I'm completely indifferent and everything's fine. But no, it's a roller coaster ride, because on the one hand, when you write a play, it's your baby. But when you write a play and you put it on the page, that's not a play. That's just a blueprint for a play. It's not a play until you have a director, until you have cast, designers, and have an audience. That's a play. And that's when you find out where you're really at. But for the playwright at that point, you're on the roller coaster at the top.
Right.
And it's going to go down. And what happens, happens. You have lost control. You've done everything that you can possibly do. And I've seen, plays of mine that I'm like, that's way better than I thought it would be. What the actors have done, what the designers have done, they've turned words on a page into something truly magical. But I've certainly seen other productions where I was looking around for my wakizashi to commit seppuku after 5 minutes, because I was so ashamed and embarrassed of how bad it was. So you're at the mercy of your collaborators. And if you're lucky, you've got collaborators who aren't merely talented, but who are as passionate about the material as you are.
That's fair. And is there anything that you're currently working on now that you're passionate about that you can share with us?
Well, I have a new play premiering next year at the Purple Rose Theater. I had written the last 3 plays I had done there were Sherlock Holmes plays, which was not the plan. I wanted to write one. I thought
Right.
it'd be fun to write a Sherlock Holmes play and make it everything, make it funny, make it romantic, have mystery, have action, have sword fighting women on stage. And I had all that. And I was really happy with it. And the theater was so happy with it. They said, that worked out really well. Can you write another one? And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I wrote another one. And they said, well, that was like our second highest selling show in history. Can you write
Wow.
another one? And so I wrote a third one, thinking, well, at the moment anyway, thinking I'm done with the Sherlock stuff. But quite literally at the premiere of the third play, I was talking to the set designer, and I just kind of went, well, that's that. We're done, And he said, well, we're saving the set. And I'm like, why would you be saving the set? He goes, well, you never know. So at the moment, I'm done. But I did write a different play, a non-Sherlock Holmes play. It's premiering at the Purple Rose Theater next year. It's a dark comedy. It's called The Antichrist Cometh. And it's about a regular, everyday guy who finds out that he may be the Antichrist. He's not sure. And it's about him and the woman who loves him. So that's what it's about. Yeah.
So the Antichrist cometh is coming in 2024. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then the other plays that you were referring to, those would be the Sherlock Holmes, The Adventure of the Elusive Ear, The Fallen Souffle, and The Ghost Machine.
Yeah. Yeah. The basic premise for anybody, if anyone's interested, is I wanted Sherlock Holmes, I wanted Dr. Watson. In the first Sherlock Holmes short story, he encounters a woman by the name of Irene Adler, who is just as brilliant as he is and outsmarts Sherlock Holmes. And then you get to the end, and Dr. Watson says, and she went off somewhere and she died. And I thought, well, maybe that just sounds so convenient. Maybe she didn't die. Maybe she fell in love with Sherlock Holmes and vice versa, and she moved in. She's
Hmm.
in 221B Baker Street, and it's kind of a Three's Company ish. And now she's got to be passed off as the housekeeper, Mrs. Hudson. And so I had those four characters. Well, actually, I had those three characters, and I wanted to add, most Sherlock Holmes stories are very heavily masculine.
Right.
It's guys doing stuff, and I wanted less of that. So I had Irene Adler, the love interest, just as brilliant as Holmes, and my villain is the daughter of Professor Moriarty, who's uh, brilliant and completely sociopathic, but incredibly charming too. And to that equation, what for each play I added two real life characters. So the first play, Elusive Ear, has Vincent Van Gogh. He's the guy who has an ear that's proving elusive. And Oscar Wilde, because Oscar Wilde makes everything better. The second play has the guy who was the first celebrity chef. You know how popular cooking shows are now?
Yep.
A guy named Auguste Escoffier was the first real true celebrity chef. He was working in London at the Savoy Hotel. The general manager of the hotel was a guy named Caesar Ritz. And they were both robbing the Savoy blind. They were both criminals. They were both working there, but they were both skimming as much off the top because they were going to open up their own hotel,
Right.
which they did. Once they got fired from the Savoy, they scuttled off to Paris and opened up a hotel called the Ritz. And so Escoffier's in that, and so is the Prince of Wales, the son of Queen Victoria, who not many people know now. He shaped up when he was king, but as a prince, he was one of the most horrible human beings alive. He would go hunting and shoot 17 tigers. He had rooms at half the brothels in Europe.
Jeez.
He used British taxpayer dollars to fund his gambling habits. He's just, a lot of people thought when Victoria dies, that's the end of the monarchy because this guy is such a clown. So he was good to have as well. And then in the last play, Sherlock Holmes and the Adventure of the Ghost Machine, it has Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, who are great because they hated each other's guts. And they're both brilliant beyond brilliant. And they both have had, they both invented inventions that can change the world, but both inventions have been stolen. And I didn't make that up. Tesla did invent a death ray. And Edison was working on a so-called ghost machine, a device to communicate with the dead.
Wow.
So those are the three. Yeah.
Now, with all of your writing and your playwright and your screenwriting, I want to ask you this. I heard this, and I want to see if you can shed some light on it. You've actually had some of your work publicly burned. Can you walk me through that?
Sure. When I was a lad, and by lad, I meant I went to Michigan State University. And I was in my dorm room one day doing whatever one does in dorm rooms. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was attending Eastern Michigan University. And with a note of panic in his voice, I heard him say, "You've got to help me." I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "I'm editing the Eastern Michigan University humor magazine, which is supposed to be written by students, but everything everybody is turning in is horrible. What are you doing right now?" And I said, "Nothing." He goes, "Come on down. We're going to do this. We're going to write this magazine." So I drove down to Ypsilanti and we, stayed up all night working on this humor magazine. Like, there was a couple of longer stories, short articles, advice columns, cartoons, etc. And the funny thing is, we were so proud of ourselves that we took all what we thought, all the really edgy stuff, we took that out. But we don't want to really upset anybody. So we'll take all the controversial stuff out. And then a couple of weeks later, it got published with with the result that some people hailed it as it's called the EMU for Eastern Michigan University. Some people said this is the greatest humor magazine in the history of the university. But other people were so distressed by some of the content that they were burning boxes of it. So there you go. I think as a writer, if you haven't been publicly burned, I mean, are you really a writer?
That's a great question. I think a lot of stuff's on laptops these days, so I'd hate to see a bunch of laptops set on fire.
Exactly. I was surprised, but also weirdly proud. It's like, wow, okay, I guess I can really write. So that was that. Yeah. But I mean, who knows? People in the privacy of their own homes, they may be burning my work left and right for all I know.
Well, congratulations on officially becoming a writer with your public burning.
Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, David, what is something that you believe people tend to misunderstand about you the most?
They think I'm a kind, decent, responsible person, which is completely untrue. Misunderstand about me? Gosh, that's a good question. I think I can I'm going to say I can definitely come across as harsh, maybe. Like I mean, I used to, when my kids played like youth soccer, I would, the community, they always ask for who can coach. And I will say I can coach because I played soccer in college and I refed and I still play soccer because I'm delusional. But I would coach these little kids. And you know how parents are when they're little kids playing, everything that their kid does is great. It's amazing. And they'd be on the sidelines, the parents would be go, yay, Marcy. And like a ball would be rolling out of bounds and Marcy would be watching it and it would go out of bounds. And the mom would be going, Marcy, that was great. And I would call Marcy over and say, Marcy, you could have got that ball, right? And she'd go, yeah. And I said, so you can try harder, right? You can try. She just goes, yeah, I could. Okay, well, let's do that. Let's try.
Right.
And, the kids realized I had their best interest at heart. I mean, win or lose, I didn't care. But like I told them, I said, you don't want to walk off the field saying, gosh, you know what? We could have tried harder. And I say that to my students as well. I mean, that's the recipe. If you want to go from mediocre to good, it's just caring enough to try. I took my daughter to a dinner last night for her birthday. We went to a sushi place about an hour away. And it's a place that they offer what's called omakase, which is you sit at the sushi bar and the chef makes you whatever the hell he wants. You don't order anything. But this guy, I'd heard amazing things about him. He's up for a James Beard Award right now. And it was stunning. I mean, we were just laughing. It's like, this is amazing because it's not just the taste, it's the texture, it's the temperature. You're watching an artist at work. And to me, that's, the one thing that maybe I come across as like too, hard or tough or whatever, especially on my students or whatever, but is you got to try, you got to care. And that just makes things infinitely better almost immediately. And people know when you're mailing it in. So I guess I can come across sometimes as a bit of a hard ass and really persnickety. But at the back of that, it's because I just want people to do as well as they can possibly do. But I try to tone it down. I'm not as much of a basket case as I used to be. I think. I used to be insanely competitive, so like I used to be on a really good soccer team, like really good soccer team. And if we lost, I wouldn't, like I lived with my girlfriend. I just wouldn't even talk to her the rest of the day because I was so pissed off.
Silent treatment.
Yeah, well, it wasn't because of her. It's because I was so angry at myself. I was like, how did that happen? But yeah, I've kind of mellowed out over the years. I'm not quite as bad as I used to be.
Well, I'm sure everyone appreciates that around you, David. Thank you.
Maybe not. Talk to my kids.
So where can people learn more about David MacGregor?
I have a website, as you're required to do. It's David MacGregor, david-macgregor.com. It has links to my shorter plays, my longer plays. When COVID hit, that kind of shut down the theater industry for a couple of years. And so I always wondered, if I could write a novel. And so I kind of decided to take baby steps. And I turned all three Sherlock Holmes plays into novels,
Oh, wonderful.
which have all been published by MX Publishing in London. And here, I had them right here. I don't know if they'd be worth putting on camera or not, but like
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
I turned this third Sherlock, all of them. Like that's, that's Sherlock Holmes, The Adventure of the Ghost Machine with Tesla on the cover. And they did all three, and they put all three in a trilogy. And they were also, in all the research that I did for the Sherlock Holmes plays, I wrote a 2-volume nonfiction book on Sherlock Holmes called Sherlock Holmes, the Hero with 1,000 Faces, which kind of traces the evolution of the character over 3 centuries. So I did that during COVID. So those are available from the publisher, but also Barnes and Noble, Amazon, whatever. And I've got plays published by various people. Right now, the Sherlock plays are published by a company called TRW, which is nice. The nice thing about them is they've got offices in New York and London. I just like the way that looks, having it published with that there. And I've gotten more involved because I wrote the Sherlock Holmes plays with the Sherlock Holmes community recently. They asked me to come do talks. I only offend 20%, I'm going to say, of the audience every time I open my mouth. So I'll take that. But I'm easy to find. Yeah. You can Google my name and you can email me. You got questions, comments, but if you want to play, short or long play, I've got a variety of material. One of my plays is getting a dozen performances this August at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll go over and check that out. And I'm easy to find. I'm easy to contact, and I'm reasonably civil most of the time.
I have time for one last question for you, David. What makes David MacGregor smile?
How I just referenced yesterday being at dinner with my daughter. I was eating and laughing because this is ridiculous. It's so good. It's so good. And that applies to anything. If it's a line in a book that I read, or it's something on the internet, or it's something in a play, it's just when you recognize this is great. This is great. I can listen to Katie Lang singing and I'm like, I'm glad I lived to hear that voice. It's just, it's usually something very human, but it's a human being doing something more amazing than I ever imagined that I could see or taste or feel or hear. And because, as you know, I mean, now, especially with media and social media, there's so much anger and there's so much negativity that you can walk out your front door thinking the universe and the world are a horrible place filled with horrible people. And it's just not true. We get a very skewed idea of other people from what we see in media and social media. So, to walk out the front door and see something beautiful and true and amazing, that makes me smile.
Well said. Thank you very much. And David, I really appreciate your time today. Everybody check out David MacGregor on his website. Google him as much as you possibly can. This has been Coffee with Chris. Remember to smile to inspire everybody and have a fantastic day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.